Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video I'll be doing a quick update for all the stuff happening in patch 8.3. There was a couple more updates added, with Blizzard trying to expand on one of the lesser known corruptions and trying to add a separate other tier for it in order to have much more interesting combinations for our classes. Also, when it comes to horrific visions, Blizzard decided to nerf the Alliance one quite a bit. So the next time the Alliance horrific vision is about, which seems to be one of the harder visions, it should be a lot more doable, as well as a couple of other updates. So let's get on into the news. First of all, one of the corruptions that was lesser known and lesser really, expanded upon is called Ineffable Truth. It is a corruption where your spells and abilities could give you a chance to show you, well, the Ineffable Truth, increasing the rate of your cooldown recovery by 30% for 10 seconds. Now, cooldown recovery rates with World of Warcraft have been a little bit weird. There are a certain few classes that play on such mechanic, and I always find those classes very enjoyable. Primarily, my Outlaw Rogue is one of those classes that plays with cooldown reduction quite well. The more common points you spend into finishers, be it for buffing yourself or doing damage or crowd control enemies, the faster you get certain abilities back, which creates an interesting gameplay where a certain amount of cooldown, like 3 minutes or 2 minutes, isn't a constant. So Blizzard wants to mess around with this more. They actually added an extra tier to Ineffable Truth, because normally it just had only a 12 corruption tier, which was enough, but they added a tier 2 corruption with it, and they also fixed a bug which prevented from items being forged with a Ineffable Truth corruption. That means next time in your Mythic Plus bag or a PvP chest, there's a good chance you might be able to get Ineffable Truth. And the tier 2 corruption of this one is actually quite major and could have some major aspects of gameplay for certain few classes. Your spells and abilities have a chance to show Ineffable Truth, increasing your rate of cooldown recovery by 50% for 10 seconds at 30 corruption. I imagine there's a couple of classes out there which could see the cooldown reduction and cooldown recovery be quite good for them. Maybe any classes with very long cooldowns in general. And this seems to apply for all of your cooldowns. This isn't a corruption that I am currently able to test on my Outlaw Rogue or any of my characters right now. But hopefully with the Tuesday reset and all the Mythic Plus chests I'll get to open, at least one of my characters will get something like Ineffable Truth in their gear. Next week, we'll be able to venture back into Horrific Visions in order to upgrade our cloaks. But also next week will be a rotation with Horrific Visions. Right now, there's two types of Horrific Visions. One for Armory, which has been proven to be a far easier vision for most players to tackle and complete. And then there's the Alliance Stormwind Horrific Vision, which majority of players have agreed is a lot more difficult. The Alleria Windrunner boss at the very end has proven herself to be quite formidable. First of all, she's not a melee enemy that can be kited around the room. Instead, she is ranged, and that means you need to use pillars to line aside if you do want to move her around the room, which can be sometimes awkward. There's a couple other things about the Stormwind Horrific Vision that also make it quite difficult, like some of the abilities that certain few enemies have to deal, and majority of classes have struggled with those that they normally wouldn't inside of a Horde Orgrimmar vision. So Blizzard decided to make some nerfs for the Stormwind scenario, starting with Alleria Windrunner. Darkened Sky, which is her base ability, now drains 40 sanity instead of 60. Darkened Sky was an interesting ability where basically the character jumps in the air and shoots in your general direction with a spray of arrows, but sometimes all those effects on very much purple ground, the bluish darkish effects, sometimes can be difficult to track, and your hitbox might have clipped those things once or twice when you did not mean to. Also, the spread is a little bit weird. Some players that have lack of mobility, as well as, let's say, trying to deal with all the other effects, have a hard time getting out of them, so this is a nice change. But also, when the Trade District bonus objective is complete, Chains of Servitude, which is another ability that she gains where she'll basically chain you and she'll hold on to you for a little bit, will now be cast once during the fight instead of twice. So when you're trying to finish the Horrific Vision, the more areas you have explored and the more mini-bosses you have attacked and defeated, the more of their mechanics Alleria gains to fight. I've ventured before to the Dwarven District, and the mechanic from there with the dynamite isn't too terrible. I've ventured into the Old Town in the past, and avoiding the eyeball, which is basically just not looking at it the whole time, is doable for majority of classes, but Chains of Servitude has been a little bit weird since it just keeps gripping you over and over and over. If you're a character that doesn't play with damage over time, there's really not a lot of abilities you can really do when that happens. and you basically have to try running away from her while Darkened Sky is happening, while all the other mechanics are happening. And if you're not a mobile character whatsoever, it can be definitely difficult because it extends the fight longer. So them reducing the duration of Chains of Servitude to be only used once a fight does make it a far easier thing to deal with if you account for all the other mechanics that you already had to deal with, plus you account for the fact that Alleria Windrunner is a range character, and again she moves super wonky compared to Thrall, which has a very easy setup for his room, very, I would say, easy set of abilities, especially as you get to some of the other objectives, and he's very consistent, while Alleria sometimes there's a bit of that jankiness that always comes whenever you do her fight. So hopefully this update is going to help a lot of people be able to tackle her a little bit easier, as I think it's a cool area. Stormwind is an awesome scenario for her visions. I like some of the fights and mechanics. I want to explore more of it, but it definitely seems a lot more intimidating than the Horde counterpart. And the last bit of news, if you're someone who's a huge fan of mounts, they recently changed where Lady Jaina Proudmoore on Mythic will now drop 2 Glacial Tide Storm, which is the mount that drops from Mythic Jaina instead of 1. And same thing goes for Neolotha and Waking City, with N'Zoth the Corruptor will now drop 2 mounts instead of 1, which is kind of a nice thing. I guess it would allow more players to get the mounts a lot faster, but it also could mean that maybe Shadowlands and the end of patch 8.3, since we're not getting patch 8.5, could be a little bit sooner than we are to expect. I mean, if Blizzard were to expect for us to hang out in Neolotha for, let's say, a year, or maybe like something like, 9 months, 8 months, then 1 amount per reclear, whenever guilds figure out how to clear all the way through N'Zoth, once they do, 1 mount per clear for a very long period of time would make sense. But instead, it'll start dropping 2 mounts. That means a lot more people will be able to get through their mounts, less clears needed for a full raid, and potentially could mean that Shadowlands could come out sooner than we are to expect. But that is of course speculation. I guess Blizzard themselves also did post that with these mounts becoming quite rare and Shadowlands comes out, taking 20 weeks or more for a full Mythic raid group to clear to get the mount felt excessive. But that means that they're expecting for us not to clear N'Zoth for 20 weeks, but rather maybe something more sane like 10. Or maybe close to 15 for our friends and family. Who knows? I guess time will tell. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this update. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always guys, I'll see all of you in another video.